We will not be ignored any longer. There is a petition out there to strip Jon Jones of the undisputed UFC heavyweight belt. It has 100,000 signatures.
Of course, we're talking about one of the greatest mixed martial arts that the sport, that the planet has ever seen. The greatest light heavyweight, without a shadow of a doubt, okay? We know this, and now he's the two-weight division champion. He's the heavyweight champion of the world, but he's holding up the division.
The petition to strip Jon Jones of his UFC title has now reached 145,142 signatures, showing just how many fans are frustrated with the current situation and want the UFC to take action, strip the title, and let the division continue without delays. However, Daniel Cormier spoke about the petition calling for Jon Jones to be stripped of his UFC title. He pointed out that it had already reached 70,000 signatures, showing how serious fans were about the issue. He mentioned that even someone he knew had signed it, which shows how wide the support has spread. Cormier seemed surprised by the number and made it clear that fans are no longer willing to wait for Jones to return. The growing support reflects how many people believe it's time for the UFC to move the division forward.
There is a signature to strip Jon Jones.
I saw
petition.
that. Did you sign it?
That's
You
over
signed it, didn't
70,000.
You signed it, didn't you?
I did.
I'm gonna search the database.
I didn't search it.
I'm gonna find your email on there.
But dude, that's 70,000 signatures.
Man, it's annoying. It's so I'm not done with Tom Aspinall.
On the other hand, Ariel Helwani discussed the growing petition to strip Jon Jones of his UFC title, which had reached 115,135 signatures just a couple of hours before they captured a screenshot. He pointed out that the situation is complicated, with both Jon Jones and the UFC sharing some responsibility. If Jon told the UFC 2 months ago that he wasn't interested in fighting, then the blame shifts away from him, and it becomes the UFC's responsibility to move the division forward. Ariel also mentioned that Dana White has said fighters should get 3 fights a year, but things got unclear when it came to Tom Aspinall, who reportedly turned down an interim fight. Overall, Ariel highlighted how messy the situation is, but noted that the large number of petition signatures shows fans are clearly frustrated and want action.
What about this? There are people who have started a petition to strip Jon Jones. We're now at 115,135 as of maybe an hour or two ago when we took the screen grab. Jon does also bring up a good point. If Jon told the UFC like 2 months ago, hey, I'm not interested, it's no longer on him.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? So like, you remember one time I sat here and I said the UFC is not to blame? And I said that because they met the number. But now if he tells them, hey, I'm not interested, all right, you could say, well, you're to blame because maybe you told them, hey, if you meet this number, I'm fighting. And then you could say, all right, UFC is now back to blame because he told them 2 months ago, you know, I'm out. Why didn't you give Tom Aspinall a fight? There's this whole thing. Now, I heard Dana White say recently, like, look, we got to give these guys 3 fights a year. Remember we talked about this yesterday to a degree? Yeah. And it's like, all right, I guess they can come out and say, look, we could have given Tom an interim fight, but he told us he didn't want that. So that's considered turning it down. The whole thing is messy. There is no black and white sort of breakdown of it all. But the point is, I think the world has spoken. Look at that.
Ariel Helwani also pointed out how big the petition to strip Jon Jones has become, calling the number of signatures unbelievable. He noted that many people, including UFC staff like Daniel Cormier, have spoken about how no one is gaining anything from the delay. If Jon Jones is really done, then the UFC should move on. But Helwani explained that the UFC doesn't actually need Jon for the summer. Not in July, August, September, or even October. The only time they really need him is November.
Tom Aspinall is the greatest heavyweight we've ever seen, and this type of shit tends to happen in this sport because we're full of recency bias. I think Jones suddenly gets excited and says,
he's been eating like 2 years of that already, though. Like, what's going to change? The duck thing's been going forever now.
What will change is he won't have the belt.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if he's done, he's done. Let's just move on.
I truly have no idea what's going to happen at this point.
I feel pretty confident. Well, when you say you don't know what's going to happen, like, you mean next or down the line?
Even next.
Meanwhile, the MMA guru spoke about the massive support behind the petition to strip Jon Jones of the UFC heavyweight title, which had reached 100,000 signatures. He emphasized how rare and powerful it is to see so many fans united on one issue. According to him, the message is clear. Fans no longer want to be ignored. The growing support shows that a large part of the UFC community believes Jon Jones should not be holding the undisputed title anymore. Instead, they feel Tom Aspinall deserves either the belt or the chance to fight another top contender for it.
We will not be ignored any longer. There is a petition out there to strip Jon Jones of the undisputed UFC heavyweight belt. It has 100,000 signatures. I need you guys to understand how crazy this is. 100,000 signatures of the UFC fan base uniting behind the idea that Jon Jones should not have the undisputed heavyweight world championship, and it should be given to Tom Aspinall, or Tom Aspinall should be able to move on and fight for undisputed.
The MMA guru also questioned why Jon Jones hasn't been stripped of his title despite being inactive. He pointed out that the reason is simple. Jon Jones is a big draw and brings in major pay-per-view sales. Because of that, the UFC is less likely to take the belt from him, unlike what they did with fighters like Jamahal Hill. According to Guru, it's not complicated. It all comes down to business and star power.
Why isn't Jones stripped? Why an interim title? Because Jon Jones brings in a lot of pay-per-view sales, so they're not going to take the belt from him like they did Jamal Hill and other people like that. It's not hard to understand, is it?
Furthermore, Michael Bisping weighed in on the debate about whether Jon Jones should be stripped of his title. He acknowledged that Jon is one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time, and without question, the best light heavyweight the sport has ever seen. Now a two-division champion and the current UFC heavyweight title holder, Jon's legacy is undeniable. However, Bisping pointed out that despite his greatness, Jon is holding up the division by remaining inactive, and that's becoming a serious issue for the rest of the heavyweight contenders.
Of course, we're talking about one of the greatest mixed martial arts that the sport, that the planet has ever seen. The greatest light heavyweight, without a shadow of a doubt, okay? We know this, and now he's a two-weight division champion. He's the heavyweight champion of the world, but he's holding up the division.
Not only that, Michael Bisping also expressed frustration over the current state of the UFC heavyweight division. He pointed out that Tom Aspinall, the interim champion, has held that status for about 70% of Jon Jones's reign as undisputed champion. According to Bisping, these two need to fight each other, and it's confusing why the matchup still hasn't been scheduled. He also commented on Jon Jones's recent behavior, the unclear tweets, the talk of retirement, and the lack of commitment. While he acknowledged Jon's legendary status and success, he emphasized that living a good life shouldn't come at the cost of holding up an entire division that's ready to move forward.
Tom Aspinall, the interim champion, has been the interim champ for 70% of Jon Jones's reign. They need to fight one another, and what the is going on? Why isn't this fight scheduled? And now, of course, we've seen all this stuff coming out about Jon Jones. He's not sure, he's tweeting, he might be retired, he might not be retired, he's living his best life. I mean, that's all well and good. Of course he's living his best life. He's had a tremendously successful life. He's one of the greatest fighters the world's ever seen, okay? And with that, he's made a tremendous amount of money. Of course, you're living a good life.
Michael Bisping stressed that as the heavyweight champion of the world, Jon Jones has a responsibility not just to himself, but to the fans, the fighters, and the entire division. Holding the title comes with the duty to defend it and prove that he truly is the undisputed champion. Right now, with Tom Aspinall holding the interim belt, Jon isn't the clear undisputed champ. Bisping made it clear that he wasn't criticizing Jon personally, but simply pointing out the reality of the situation. The division is stalled, and it's time for clarity.
As the heavyweight champion of the world, you have a debt, you have an obligation to the fighters, to the fans, to the rest of the division, to your bloody self, to prove that you are the undisputed champion of the world. He's not the undisputed champ because there's an interim champion. And I'm not saying this as someone trying to on Jon Jones. No, this is just the situation.
Meanwhile, fans are busy signing petitions and calling for action. Jon Jones appears unbothered, enjoying his time away from the octagon. He's been seen riding motorcycles and relaxing in pools during his stay in Thailand, living what looks like a stress-free lifestyle. This contrast between an active fan movement demanding change and a champion seemingly disconnected from the situation only adds to the frustration. As supporters push for the division to move forward, Jon continues to enjoy his time off with no no clear sign of when or if he'll return to defend his title.
My team has global.
In response, Tom Aspinall took a shot at Jon Jones by remaking one of his training videos, matching the movements in a slow and playful way. The video was a clear mockery of Jon's original.
Great, get off. Sorry, it's a Jones thing, Tom.
However, Curtis Blaydes shared his thoughts on a potential fight between Tom Aspinall and Jon Jones. He said he would slightly lean toward Aspinall, giving him about a 55% chance of winning. Blaydes made it clear that this wouldn't be a dominant or easy fight. After all, Jon Jones is one of the greatest fighters in MMA history. He's a complete fighter with high-level skills in every area, and anyone going up against him has a serious challenge. Still, Blaydes believes Aspinall has the right tools, speed, power, and movement to edge out a close win if they ever meet in the octagon.
Do you think Aspinall beats him?
Yeah, I would pick him. Like, I would go 55% him. Obviously, it's not gonna be a landslide. Like, we're going against Jon Jones. He's a legend. He got all the weapons.
Additionally, Demetrius Johnson believes Tom Aspinall has the speed, athleticism, and power to give Jon Jones serious problems. He pointed out that Aspinall is still young and improving with every fight. In his view, the current version of Jon Jones might struggle against someone like Aspinall, who won't hesitate or fight scared.
But I think Tom Aspinall has the speed, the athleticism, and the power to give Jon Jones problems. You know, Tom Aspinall is still young and he's still getting better. But I think this version of Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall can beat him. I feel comfortable saying that. Just because you have somebody who's going to take the fight to Jon Jones and not be scared.
Moreover, UFC legend Georges St-Pierre shared some advice for Tom Aspinall, urging him to stop worrying about Jon Jones and focus on what he can control. According to GSP, waiting around and stressing over Jones's next move is a waste of energy. He admitted it's a tough situation, but said it's better for Aspinall to mentally move on and put his full attention into whoever comes next. St-Pierre stressed the importance of staying sharp, staying motivated, and not letting uncertainty slow him down.
Tom should not focus on that because it's outside of his control, and he's wasting a lot of energy focusing on that. And I know it's very hard, but he needs to sort of self-hypnose himself to focus on the next thing and be hungry about the next task. And by doing this, only focusing on the next thing, he's going to build up his legacy, and perhaps one day he's going to be the greatest. You know, he's got all the tools as well to be.
Meanwhile, light heavyweight contender Anthony Smith doesn't think Jon Jones is avoiding the fight. In his view, Jones just isn't focused on competition right now. He's not training, not in camp, and not thinking about lining up a fight. Smith described him as being in full control of his own timeline, doing things at his own pace. He called it typical Jon Jones, staying on the sidelines until he decides it's time.
I don't think Jon is ducking him at all. Not in the least. I think that Jon is doing whatever the he wants to do right now, and that's not booking a fight, and that's not training, and that's not preparing for a fight. It's something he doesn't want to do right now, because that Jon Jones is not in any sort of fight preparation at all. So I don't know. I don't think that he's ducking a fight. I think that he's just doing it on his own terms, and he's going to make Aspinall wait for it, which is the most Jon Jones you can imagine.
At last, Anthony Smith thinks Jon Jones is the type of person who often does the opposite of what others want. He said that if both Jon and Tom Aspinall agree to fight at the same time, Jon might lose interest. For example, if Aspinall wants to fight in October, Jon might say he wants to fight in December instead. Smith believes this is just how Jon Jones is. He likes to do things his own way.
He's just so in his own head, and the universe is only what's going on between his ears, that if it makes sense there and he's happy, literally nothing else matters. He's just kind of aloof to everything that's around him.
I don't know if I would explain it like that. I think, and with my experience, if Jon wants something and that's also what Tom Aspinall wants, Jon will immediately not want that thing anymore. He is.
He's like the kid who has a toy he hasn't played with in 10 years, but then once the neighbor kid plays with it, now he wants to play with the toy.
Now he wants his toy back. Yeah. He's such a contrarian by nature. So if they say, yeah, let's John, John, we want you to fight in October, and he'll say, I'll go see what Aspinall. Go to Aspinall first and then come back to me. Then they'll call back and say, yeah, Aspinall says he's in. Nah, man, I'm thinking December. That's who he is.
Furthermore, Eddie Alvarez gave his opinion on the possible fight between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. He praised Aspinall's speed, striking, and athletic skills, saying he moves like a much smaller fighter. Alvarez said Aspinall is very dangerous when standing, but he also pointed out that all of that won't matter if Jon Jones takes the fight to the ground. In his view, if Jones gets a takedown and uses his grappling, he could easily control or even submit Aspinall, making all of Aspinall's strengths less important.
Aspinall is like a crazy dangerous threat standing up. He moves like a lightweight, crazy athletic, but none of that matters when you're on the ground. And I feel like that allure of Tom Aspinall being so great, the movement, the speed, the athleticism, all goes completely out the window when John rips him to the floor.
However, Australian heavyweight Tai Tuivasa spoke about a possible fight between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. He said if there's anyone who can beat Jones right now, it's probably Aspinall. Tuivasa mentioned that Aspinall is younger and still improving, while Jones is getting older and not in his prime anymore. Still, he called Jones the greatest of all time and said that even with all the crazy things Jones has done outside the cage, his fighting legacy is undeniable.
Aspinall is like a crazy dangerous threat standing up. He moves like a lightweight, crazy athletic, but none of that matters when you're on the ground. And I feel like that allure of Tom Aspinall being so great, the movement, the speed, the athleticism, all goes completely out the window when John rips him to the floor.
What do you think about this fight? Is Jon Jones ducking Tom Aspinall? We would love to hear your thoughts, so share your thoughts in the comments section and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video.